This is all wrong. I shouldn't be up here. I should be back in school on the other side of the ocean. Yet you all come to us young people for hope. How dare you?
Boring. 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 Boring.
You got it work. Don't tell us what we're going to feel. We're trying to solve a problem. Don't tell us what we're going to feel.
I'm not telling you.
Because you're in no position to dictate that.
That's exactly what we're doing.
You're in no position to dictate what we're going to feel.
I call again for an immediate ceasefire in Gaza, the return of the sausages, the hostages.
Welcome to another edition of Lembertopic Live here on unprecedented.tv. Thanks very much for joining me, where we find the facts, kill the spin, and tell it like it is as best we can from stories all around the world. Coming up now is a program which might become a series, a broadcast breakdown, where we take a look at what the mainstream media is saying and why they're saying it. The context here is that unprecedented.tv was spawned by a frustration that the mainstream media was over-filtering your news. Now, let's be honest, every system of news filters to some extent. As soon as you decide what you're going to cover, by implication, you're not covering other things. And unprecedented.tv is no exception, because we can't cover everything all the time from every angle. So even this is, to some extent, filtered. But I don't seek to hide the truth. I don't seek to direct you in a certain direction, except so much as to share my opinions, which you can agree with or disagree with. That's your call. But fundamentally, here's the big point. As far as we're concerned, we feel here at Unprecedented that there is a free speech vacuum going on. Why is that? And in order to understand and answer that question, we will have this weekly show, and if enough of you watch it, a series looking at the mainstream media from the outside and to some extent from the inside too. The purpose here isn't to tell you what to think and what to watch, but to make you aware of how the media works. And therefore, being forewarned is also being forearmed. I should tell you, I used to work for the BBC for a considerable number of years. I've also done lots of other broadcasting, going right back to my first interview on the BBC when I was a contributor rather than a presenter in 1983. Can you believe it? Yes, 1983. And I was making my first videos, as they were then called, around 1990. So I've been around for a while. And it's that which has caused us to set up Unprecedented, a general frustration with the blancmange, vanilla sky way in which you're treated, where you're told the things that the media want you to know, and perhaps the stuff that isn't quite so convenient for the mainstream narrative that is swept under the carpet. So success for me is, in this weekly show, and as I say, could become more frequent if you like it, to have a discussion with somebody from the mainstream media. In fact, somebody who speaks for the mainstream media to an extent. And that is Simon Spanswick, who joins me now. He is the head, the supremo of the Association for International Broadcasters. Simon, good to see you again.
Good to see you, Lambert.
Tell us once again, what does the AIB, the Association for International Broadcasting, do? And I recognize there could be boos coming at you through the screen because there's an inherent suspicion in the social networks towards the mainstream. But tell us what you do, and then that'll explain the context.
It's far too early in the morning here in the UK to be booed at. It's only a little after 8:30 here in the UK as we go live this morning. The AIB has been around since 1993, and we're the industry body for broadcasters all over the world. We have members from New Zealand through Australia and Singapore, right the way across to Europe and North America. And we help our members who are broadcasters, who are companies that support media organizations through transmission, distribution, things like that, with telling them what's going on in different media markets, get involved in regulatory affairs. We have working groups that look at cybersecurity for broadcasters. That's a very important topic to make sure that broadcasters keep on the air and play out the things that they want to play out, and that nobody hijacks them. We look at media freedom, helping where we can to make sure that countries around the world uphold media freedom and allow journalists to do their jobs. And we work on issues like sustainability, something close to your heart, I know.
You're just provoking me now. You know that's a red rag Turnbull, but okay, carry on. Well, I was going to actually for that reason.
Other things. And we celebrate the best in journalism and factual broadcasting with our annual awards. They're open for entry at the moment. We've got work coming in from all over the world, from Indonesia, from Malaysia, from across Africa, from Europe. People who have told stories, the stories that matter, and want their work showcased in our global awards.
Nice advert there for the AIB, but I suppose I can't blame you at all. You mentioned, no doubt deliberately, knowing my views about the non-existent climate crisis, my view, you mentioned the mainstream media's implicit support for that agenda. Maybe we should start with that, because the purpose is to look at a few stories. We can't cover everything, but in order to educate ourselves and hopefully the viewers about how mainstream thinks, let's start with a big story from America. This is the story of the flooding which has taken place in Texas, a place which is quite mountainous. Maybe some of the viewers aren't aware of the fact that parts of Texas are really pretty rocky, and they have ravines, steep ravines, which means in short terms that when it rains heavily, at the bottom of those V-shaped valleys, the water rises very fast. And this has been on every day, not least because of a pretty big death toll, over 80 people there. I suppose not big compared to Gaza, but big compared to weather events in America. Now, the ABC, the American Broadcasting Corporation or Company, is it? Do you know? Company. They're quite typical of the massive coverage in America, understandably, which this story has attracted. Let's have a look at one of the reports here. Now, the reason I'm sharing this is because I want to see how it's being reported. And there's this climate change undertone to a lot of it. But let's just have a look at this one first. This is Good Morning America on ABC.
Hill country of Texas that is known as Flash Flood Alley. They also, going into this, had severe to exceptional drought. Now, obviously, we've had a ton of water, so that's going to play a part in the flood watch that is still up until 7 p.m. It includes the same areas that were hit, but also San Antonio and Austin. Overall, this is for 2 to 4 inches. Locally, up to 10 inches, guys. So this is a big deal the next 24 to 36 hours.
A very big deal. And Ginger, how did this even happen? So much rain falling in such a short time.
Right. Well, part of the problem is what we call an MCV, mesoscale convective vortex. It's a really slow moving system, and it's stuck. There's not a lot of steering winds to get it out of there. And then there are 3 sources of moisture from the Pacific, from the Gulf, and actually from remnants of Barry. That was a storm that hit Mexico more than a week ago. So put all that together, it's like having a kiddie pool and turning 3 faucets on all at once.
And Matt Gutman, in his report, he was telling us there are questions on the ground right now about these warnings and when they went out. What do we know? Yeah,
we know from the AP, they said the National Weather Service offices there were more than staffed. They were staffed extra, actually, which is normal. The National Weather Service confirming to us that that's called surge staffing ahead of a big event like this. The warnings went out starting with the flood watch at 1:18 p.m. the day before. So that's the day before into the evening of the WPC puts out this saying 3-inch per hour rainfall rates. They're saying this is going to be bad. Again, 6 p.m. the night before. By midnight, that heavy rain begins. And then at 1:14 a.m., the first flash flood warning goes out. That's the type that goes out on the NOAA weather radio. That's the type that would fly onto your phone. And it had a considerable tag, meaning this is bigger than your run-of-the-mill flood warning. Then the river starts rising, and by 3:35 a.m., that wording is upped. It says, move to higher ground now, act quickly to protect your life. I have to say, just to button here, that having a NOAA weather radio would be very important for everybody, because I think a lot of people are scared, thinking, what's going to happen if I go out camping?
So on that one, they were pretty clear on the fact that the inference, if you look at the whole article, is they didn't get the warnings out in time. in that particular piece, it was a very practical report. I think that was a fairly responsible piece of reporting, Simon.
Yes, I mean, it was explaining for a start how it all happened, how these weather systems came together to cause this, the unprecedented combination of those three sources, and then went through what the Weather Service had done, the responsible agencies in the States had done to communicate that to the public. Now, it's interesting that you mentioned your NOAA radio, the national, I've forgotten what it stands for. It's the National something and something or other, which is a US government body, and that has a flood warning service, which demonstrates the importance of having different devices with you. Because, of course, if a mobile phone tower is swept away by a flood, you're not going to get mobile reception. So actually having radio, which travels far faster, far further, is very important in situations like that. The other issue is, of course, that it seemed to be happening throughout the middle of the night, the heaviest rainfall starting from around midnight, and then flash floods in the early hours of the morning when most people are asleep and wouldn't be aware necessarily of what's happening, particularly if they've gone to bed not having seen those warnings the night before. But yes, the ABC report on Good Morning America there was factual. It went through the steps and helped people understand what had just happened.
The NOAA stands for National Oceanic and Atmospheric. Oh, I don't remember the last word. Something like administration, I think. My team will tell me if I'm wrong. National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration. I'm sure viewers will tell me if I'm wrong as well. That's what NOAA stands for. Features very heavily in the film The Day After Tomorrow. So you've got that responsible reporting there, but a lot of the reporting in the United Kingdom really tends to focus more on the human side, more on the dramatic pictures. Why is it that, for example, the British Broadcasting Corporation tended to mainly focus on repeated pictures of the flooding rather than on the science?
I suspect the pictures paint 1,000 words, and if you've only got access to 30 seconds of social media clips to demonstrate the story, then you in a high-pressured newsroom are going to use that. I think there are lots of people working in mainstream broadcasters who are scientific experts. You think of people that have done climate coverage over the years and trying to explain, for example, it was the BBC's David Shukman who came up with the concept of covering Amazonian deforestation by referring to areas the size of football fields, so that people could actually get a visual impression of just how big an area was being cut down every day. So there are people that are exploring that. I think there's a reticence in newsrooms, oh goodness, not another iceberg story, when a science correspondent comes along, an environment correspondent pitches to cover a story, and then the jaded news editors say, oh, another one? No, we've done that so many times. But there's always a competition, as you said earlier, for the airtime that you've got, the limited airtime, particularly if you think of the half-hour main bulletins at 1, 6 and 10. There's only a limited number of stories you can actually fit in there. Clearly, there is an appetite, as we've seen explored over the past few years with the rise of social and the rise of digital coverage, that there's much more news on a BBC or ITV News website than they can possibly put into their half-hour mainstream bulletins.
Yeah, you say that, but I want to show you how, if we can get the clip ready from the BBC, I want to show you how the BBC generally has presented this. Now, I recognize I'm just using two clips, one from America, one from the BBC. It's not exhaustive, but I feel that the tone is different in two ways. First of all, this seems to be a more emotional take on it. And once again, with the caveat that this is just one clip, it seems to focus mainly on the tragedy rather than the science. Let's see if we can get that. Can we get the clip up from the BBC and see if we can play that, please? This is typical from News Channel, I think it is, of how it's been covered.
Killed by flash floods that have devastated parts of central Texas has risen to 80, including at least 28 children. A massive search continues for dozens of people, including 10 girls, who were among hundreds at a summer camp when the floodwaters hit. The Guadalupe River burst its banks during heavy rains northwest of San Antonio. Well, President Trump, who's set to visit this area later this week, has signed a major disaster declaration for the affected counties where more heavy rain is forecast. From the scene, our Chief North America correspondent Gary O'Donoghue has sent us this report.
Now into the fourth day of this search and rescue effort, and the death toll continues to rise inexorably. Emergency services and volunteers have been out by the camps ever since the floodwater hit, walking the trails, looking for the missing girls. So I'm just across the river now from Camp Mystic, and you can see where the recreation hall had its whole front wall torn away. There are still some rescue workers over there sifting through the debris because there are still some of the girls missing. But as time passes, now well beyond 48 hours after the flooding, hope of finding anyone alive is significantly diminishing. Debris still scatters the huts at Camp Mystic, where the girls were staying for the Independence Day holiday weekend. There are parents who still do not know where their children are, like Michael.
We got here and started looking, and the game warden showed up, or we went as far as we could downstream. But we don't have the equipment for that, so we're letting them do that, and then we're looking for places that they're going to potentially be alive.
More than 800 people have already been rescued in the past days, though many did not make it. Conditions continue to be challenging for the rescue teams, with more warnings about further rain and potential flooding. Local officials say they're doing everything they can.
And it was nothing short of horrific to see what those young children went through. And we will remain 100% dedicated, searching for every single one of the children who were at Camp Mystic, as well as any.
And so it goes on. This continues to be a human interest story. We're a couple of minutes into the story. They're 2.5 minutes, and they haven't really talked about the reasons at all. It's all human interest.
But I think in their defense, it's 4 days after the event happened. And if you are a viewer outside the United States, you're probably more interested in the aftermath and the human tragedy that has occurred, rather than the science, which may be explained later on down the line. Again, it's a question of priorities and how you judge what the audience might be most interested in, and how you respond to their needs. In a 2.5 minute, 3 minute package, trying to explain the weather systems in any depth when there's a major rescue operation going on and there are families affected with lots of missing children, which takes priority. I would argue that they've got it right.
Yeah, the thing, I think the issue I've got is, and once again, I can't stress this enough, I don't want to be accused of bias myself by juxtaposing two random or two perhaps even curated pieces of video, one from the American Broadcasting Company and the other one from the British Broadcasting Company, which, as far as I understand, have a certain relationship between each other as well. Interesting for another time. But I have felt that the coverage in the United Kingdom has mainly been to tell us how tragic it all is, rather than talking about the science. Now, maybe that makes me seem like a cold-hearted climatologist, but I'm interested in why, not just the outcome. One of the problems I've got with British Broadcasting Corporation's news channel is they pretty much cover the same packages once or twice an hour. So there's plenty of space to talk about the science, but they keep running those same stories about how many are dead, rather than the geography of the place. They mentioned it a little bit in some parts of that, but mainly you go to America to find out why it's happening, and in my view, Britain to see the tragic consequences. You just don't really agree with me, do you?
Well, I think if you look at that ABC clip, that was the day after, or the morning after, presumably, that the floods had started, judging by the timeline they put on. So that's a much more immediate need to understand what happened. And 4 days later in the UK, we're learning about the ongoing search and rescue operation and the effect on people. And it must be, I'm lucky, I've never been in a huge flood situation, but I've seen some of the footage of this extraordinary body of water that just rose and rose and rose with, just as the tsunami happened in Japan, houses being swept along, whole houses, because in America they tend to build wooden structures, and perhaps they're not as well founded into the ground as they might be here in Europe. So yeah, there is dramatic stuff. Maybe it's better to report the here and now and then look at the causes afterwards. In terms of your concept that perhaps if they're repeating this over and over again, why isn't there somebody putting the science out there? That could be a valid argument, I think.
Well, obviously I would think that because that's what I'm saying, but I feel that the balance is slightly wrong. I want to pursue this into another area. We haven't got very much time, but there is an interesting piece that I discovered, which can we get the still from the BBC up, please? Yeah, this came up. Let me read it. This is all about the same Texas situation here. Now, what I find interesting about this is it's overtly focused on climate change. It says the influence of climate change cannot be ignored as another factor in extreme weather events like this. Well, it's difficult to directly attribute the influence of the warming planet to one particular weather event. Sea surface temperatures and on it goes about the Gulf of Mexico. Now, it seems to me they just can't resist doing something there, which, based on what you've just said, I wasn't trying to booby trap you, but based on what you just said, is rather distasteful. Instead of talking about the science, they immediately do their go-to thing, which the BBC always does. The science is settled. Everything's about climate change if there's an extreme weather event. They say, well, it's difficult to attribute this to climate change, and then they imply it's about climate change. Now, that doesn't seem to be objective broadcasting. I know that I've raised this with you publicly and privately before, but my issue is, if what you've just said is correct, and there was a human interest story and so forth, it's totally inappropriate in a time of tragedy, a time of mass fatality, to immediately try to cite this as another example of the bleating obsession that I think the BBC has about what I think is a non-existent climate emergency.
Well, they haven't used the phrase climate emergency. They've said climate change. And, as we head towards our third heat wave in a month in the UK over the next few days, things have changed. The climate, there is a change to the way we remember how the world used to be. I can remember 1976. You might just be able to.
I was 11. Of course I can remember it. I'm only just a bit younger than you.
But it was a really hot summer, and clearly then nobody was talking. I certainly don't remember about anybody saying this is a change of climate. But there have been so many freak weather events around the world that something is happening. Clearly, the world is not as happy as it used to be in terms of keeping an equilibrium in the weather around the world. There have always been devastating weather events. You look at things in Asia. Bangladesh used to be hit by extraordinary flooding. It doesn't help that it's a very low-lying country with thousands of people made homeless or injured. So yeah, you can say that it's climate change is happening. I think you wouldn't disagree with that, would you? That the climate is changing.
Climate always changes and has done for thousands of millions of years.
Yeah.
Since long before, as I say, I don't want to get into a big, heavy conversation about the science of climate change. I want to stay on media, but yes, it has always changed. And that's my issue. My issue is that the reporting in the mainstream media tends to be one-sided. And I do point the finger of blame at the BBC. I have got a different view on this one. I think that the BBC is far too quick to be totally one-sided in its reporting of climate change and this claim that this global warming. I do think, you're saying BBC, but same goes for Sky, same goes for a lot of the mainstream media. They jump on anything which looks like a heat wave. You said it yourself. Oh, 3 heat waves. That's just that's a phrase. You say heat wave, I say summer. And most people I know are pretty happy to fly off to Torremolinos or Greece because it's warmer than our heat waves in Britain. So there's nothing that special about 32 Celsius.
No, but there is here because it doesn't usually get to that here in the UK, and the plants are definitely feeling it in the garden. So
that's because you don't water your garden. Maybe
no,
the pipe ban. My potatoes are doing just fine, thanks, mate. In fact, I'm having a particularly good crop this year. I'm going to have 100 kilos of potatoes. 100 kilos.
It's either famine or glut when you grow your own. Anyway, we're getting away from the topic at hand here. I blame the moderator. But
you can't blame the moderator. But I've got another sucker punch coming your way. I warn you. Carry on. You keep digging your hole there. Go on.
Anyway, we can agree to disagree on this. I mean, I think the problem is as well that scientists don't all agree on the effects that various things are having around the world. We heard this last week that for the first time since records began, the glacier at the top of Mont Blanc, or the snow is it's above 1 degree, which has never happened this early in the year. So things are changing. The weather is changing. Yeah. And so that could be the next place to go for your suntan, the top of Mont Blanc.
You can get an amazing suntan on top of Everest. Actually, it's not about suntan. It's not about the strength
of the snow.
It's not about the strength of the sun's rays. It's about in terms of giving a burns. It's about the strength of the sun's rays versus the cooling effect of the air. But I'm tempted to talk about climate change, but I won't go down that path in terms of the science. I will continue. Here's a sucker punch coming up. Highlight on exactly the things that you've said. Your hoist by your own petard, to use a phrase from the French Revolution, with this little thing here. Let's have a look at this. There's a very interesting little discovery. Heavy snow hits Turkey's northeast as wildfires rage. Okay, well, there's light wildfires raging in some parts of Turkey, but look at the snow. Right, that's in Turkey in July. I had to go to physics.org to find this, phys.org. Not a whisper, as far as I can see, not a whisper on the BBC about the fact it's snowing in northern Turkey. Why not? If the BBC is really, I use the BBC as a totem for all of mainstream media. If they're really that concerned about being balanced, why isn't the British public being told if you went to northern Turkey a few days ago, you'd have been in a blanket of snow? Because it doesn't fit the narrative, because it's confusing. Even this article suggests that there's some kind of a global warming effect in the cooling, which is ridiculous in my view. But you don't even get the chance to know this information. Why not? Well, why is the mainstream media still scared of snow?
I don't know whether it's scared of snow. I'm not particularly scared of snow. I don't know many people who are. We all like it in moderation. I think it again goes back to the priorities, and where you can get teams, particularly if you are a mainstream broadcaster. You don't have people everywhere. You may have a network of freelancers. Maybe you need to expand that network of freelancers and stringers around the world. But you cannot fit everything into the package. I haven't looked at the BBC website to see, or anybody else's websites to see about this Turkish snowfall. There is simply too much news. There is simply too much news to cover it effectively.
Okay, so, but here's the point I'm making. As I say, let's stay away from the climatology debate in terms of the rights and wrongs. This wasn't covered. The BBC is all over the Texas floods. Can't wait to tell us that there could be a essentially global warming effect on this. But suddenly there's a blanket of snow in northeast Turkey, as it says in this article, a rare blanket of heavy snow fell on parts of northeastern Turkey on Friday. That's last Friday. If you're watching on the 8th of July, this is going out live. If you're rewatching it, this is the 4th of July that this happened. And not a whisper, not a single camera. They've managed to get plenty of cameras to Texas. Now, I'm suggesting that this is a kind of mainstream bias because this is confusing to the viewer. The viewer's being told that we're frying. You yourself mentioned 3 heat waves in Britain. That's not a heat wave that we're looking on the screen. That's snow conditions. That's skiing conditions. And I'm suggesting that that's a kind of bias in the mainstream, which is driving people away from that mainstream.
I don't agree with that. I think we can agree to differ. That it's impossible to cover all these stories. And going back to the clip you played from the BBC News Channel of Gary Donoghue in the States, he did not mention climate change once.
Not in that one.
Talking about the effects of the flooding. And the destruction that had wrought over a large area of one of the US's largest states, and at an unexpected time. It doesn't seem to have happened before. So it is an unprecedented event, and that's appropriate thing to cover on unprecedented.tv. Yeah. So I think we've got to be slightly more circumspect. We've never been told by any news organization from when the newspaper was first printed all the stories, all the news, because too much goes on in the world and more stuff is going on at the moment. I mean, we could talk, for example, about the hearing in Australia of the DJ of 2-Day FM, the prank call made back in 2012 when they rang up the King Edward VII Hospital in London, pretending to be the Queen and then Prince Charles. These DJs have just been sacked a long time after the event, but it's obviously been building up. And he's now blaming the broadcaster for putting that prank in place, which led to the death of a nurse who'd given out the information. This is about responsibility of the media as well. It can't do everything, but it has to act responsibly, and it has to be careful. It has to think before it opens its mouth, puts vision on the screen, puts sound on the radio.
Okay, I understand that. I would put it to you that it's responsible to give to both sides, figuratively speaking, the heat waves in Britain and the snow in Turkey. We're getting the heat waves in Britain, but not the snow in Turkey.
Possibly because that part of Turkey is slightly less accessible than the southern coast of Turkey, where people go on holiday, and so it's of less public interest. You've got to bear in mind the public interest here. Are we interested as a layperson in snow in northern Turkey while the sun is blazing down in Bodrum and Antalya?
I'm pretty interested in it when we're being told one side all the time. I'm not planning to go to the heat wave-stricken parts of Europe this week, but we keep being shown it on the television, and it's not beyond the wit of the enormous BBC. And I'm going to reveal something about unprecedented TV now. The BBC employs more people than we do. Yes, I know, it's surprising. They might have been able to get one person up there to say, this is unusual, you should know, for the sake of balance, it's snowing in Turkey. I probably indulged myself a little bit on that one. Let's get to just one other area that I'd like to cover. Once again, this is now back to the UK. Last year, that was the horrendous killing of children in Southport at a Taylor Swift dance club. Horrendous. Any parent who feels anything would have been appalled, shocked and distressed by it. At the time, we were told that it had nothing to do with terrorism and misinformation was causing all kinds of riots. I'm going to take a clip, if we can get the clip from Parliament of Yvette Cooper, the Home Secretary. Let's just see what she said about this at the time. She was quite clear about it, I think. I'll see if I can get that. Might not be able to. Let me just tell you it, and then we'll see if we can get the clip. Yvette Cooper was saying that it was wrong to spread misinformation. We got a problem with the clip, but we'll come to it in a minute. She said that it was nothing to do with terrorism and so forth, and the mainstream media immediately criticised anybody who was demonstrating, saying that it was stirring up hatred and implying it was all racially and right-wing extremist kind of response to it. I'm sure you remember that. And I always felt like saying, well, I did say, in fact, on a social tweet, on an X, a tweet as we call them, that it woe betide the mainstream if it turns out that there's any terrorist association or anything wrong with the reporting. I'm sure you remember all this, Simon.
Yes. And I think the authorities were at pains to point out that it was not a terrorist act at the time. People clearly drew their own conclusions. The question is whether it is right to question what's coming out from government to that extent when a de facto statement is being made by the Home Secretary. Should that be challenged when all the other authorities are saying, no, this is definitely not a case of terrorism? People were clearly asking questions. People were suspicious. And I think it took some time for mainstream press and media to get into the story in the depth and discover the identity of the perpetrator.
Well, the social networks knew it almost immediately. I think we've got the clip now. Can we see if we can play the clip? Yes, here it is. Yvette Cooper. This is what she said shortly after the event.
It is extremely important that people don't spread damaging misinformation online. False information has already been extensively shared in the last 24 hours. Those who do this for their own purposes risk undermining a crucial criminal investigation. And I ask everyone to show some respect for the community in Southport and for families who are grieving and in trauma. In these dark and difficult moments, the police must be able to get on with their work, and communities must be given the time and space to grieve and heal without outside voices seeking to use events to stir up division or advance their own views.
Now, that's what she said, and there was the inference that a lot of people were lying about what was going on. There's a lot of statement about the fact that somehow any suggestion that there was a terrorist involvement here or any extremism, it was completely wrong. But lo and behold, this is what the BBC now says. Look at what it says here. Quite clear, unequivocal words. Families demand answers ahead of Southport inquiry opening. The inquiry will examine the lead up to the attack on the wider issue of the. I think we need to. Can we get rid of the ticker for a minute? The inquiry will examine the lead up to the attack and the wider issue of extremist violence. Extremist violence. So suddenly, extremist violence comes in as a phrase. It's the exact opposite of what we were being told by the mainstream media last year, that there was no terrorist involvement. It was almost like there was a collusion between the politicians, including Yvette Cooper, and the mainstream media, while the social media said, no, this isn't correct. And I put it to you, Simon, that the social media turned out to be absolutely correct because of subsequent facts. We haven't got time to go through all the details. I would say, once again, the mainstream media let us down.
I think it did what it could at the time. I think it's dangerous to allow to criticize too much what the mainstream media did then with the facts that were available to them. And there may well have been what's known here in the UK as a D notice put out on certain aspects of the case. This is where the government tells broadcasters, it's not used very often, and I don't know that it was used in this case, not to say certain things that could harm the United Kingdom or cause major disruption through whatever riots, whatever. So I don't know whether that's the case. I just mentioned that still exists and is used on very, very rare occasions. The problem with social media is that you get so much stuff coming out that isn't verified, and it's all about the verification that's important. People spread information. There have been cases, let's just take this on a wider scale. In India, for example, where there have been cases where somebody has been identified as having perpetrated something, and that has been shared around WhatsApp groups, leading to the lynching and killing of this person who was actually completely innocent of any crime. And I think there was a danger that that could have been the case here. And we did see rioting result. And if you have unfettered information that isn't proved correct, things can happen, and you can't put the bottle back in the genie back in the bottle. So we have to be slightly more circumspect. This is an adult democracy here in the United Kingdom, and we hope that rule of law is going to continue. We're not going to have a breakdown of law and order, and that was the danger after those heinous crimes in Southport.
But the issue here is, if we can we just get that report up again for a minute, please, if we can. There we are. Thank you. Just to read what it says: that the inquiry will examine the lead up to the attack and the wider issue of extremist violence. Now, we were told the exact opposite in the mainstream media, and the suspect social networks that you describe as not necessarily being verified, they were right. The mainstream was wrong, because the mainstream simply swallowed hook, line and sinker and seemed to ape what was being said by ministers, when it turns out that this was extremist, that there was a terrorist connection, that the boy who we were told was Welsh, basically born in Wales, he was as Welsh as I'm Northern Irish. Lembedopic isn't a Northern Irish name. So what happened was the mainstream media colluded with the ministers to make the public angry. And I'm suggesting the reason that social media, and this is a whole conversation for a different day, the social media is growing in power, is because the public trust the social media more than they trust the mainstream media.
I think collusion is a bit of a strong word to use. I think the reporters and editors of the day, both in newspapers and on television and radio, looked at the facts that they were being given, looked at the circumstances, and reported what they knew without fear or favor. And clearly things have gone on, and more stuff has come out of the woodwork as the days and weeks moved on. But you can only report as a journalist what you know to be the fact at the time. Otherwise, you are speculating and you are not doing your job. If you are, you can question by all means and probe and hunt for the information, but you've got to rely on the facts that you are presented with. You can challenge those facts, you can ask questions, but to say, I think, that you've got to then rely entirely on the rumor mill. You can report that the rumor mill is doing X, Y, but that's not necessarily helpful in reporting the story of these dreadful crimes.
I find that fascinating. I think we need to probably do a one-day-long program, not least because I feel better now. I feel I've had some counselling a little bit, but the unresolved issues are, obviously there's a climate debate. Maybe we can do that offline sometime. But the coverage of climate, that's interesting. Then the extent to which mainstream can be accused of colluding with what you might call the mainstream politics as well, because not everybody took that position. And then, of course, the most important thing here is, where do we get the truth and how do you triangulate? Now, we've talked about that before, Simon. I suppose I'll give the last word to you here. What do you think is the best thing for people to do if they actually want to get to the facts?
It depends on the story they're looking at. I think you have to accept that a majority of the information that we are given by the print media and the television and radio is honest, decent, truthful, and correct. Clearly, people make mistakes, particularly in a high-pressured newsroom environment where there's information coming at them 24 hours a day from all directions, competing stories coming in. But let me tell you this, having worked in the BBC like you know that people walk in the door in the morning or for a night shift. They are there to do their job. They don't come in with preconceptions as to everybody is going to be. We've got to get certain stories out there. You do whatever's happening on the day. We were all taught in the BBC, leave your prejudices at the door. Do not bring them in. You've got to be even-handed as a human being can be in broadcasting the news to the nation and to the world. And they're not there. They're not nasty people, but journalists have a job to do. It's not an easy job. And covering some of these stories, I take my hats off to some of the people that sit through these lengthy trials, hearing all the dreadful details of what's happened, and manage to come up with a dispassionate report at the end of each day that comes into our homes. It's not an easy job. So don't bash journalists too much. They're there to do a job. They're there to do the best job they can. Sometimes they get things wrong. We're all human. Even you and I get things wrong very occasionally, Lambert. Not often, I agree, but sometimes we do. So yeah, it's a question of using your own judgment, and I think that's where media literacy comes in. The sources have quadrupled, quintupled, billionized, I don't know, over the past, since 1976, when you and I were lads, not together, I have to say. But and now there is so much information out there. How do we take what we see as being truthful? It's a terribly difficult thing to judge. And that's why we pay for news services, whether it's Sky, ITV, the ABC in Australia, the ABC in America, two different organizations, to tell us what's going on in the world. We're never going to get everything that's going on in the world. We just have to believe in the organizations that we rely on for information.
Thanks so much. That is Simon Spanswick bringing us to the end of this episode of Lembetopic Live on Unprecedented TV. As I often say, our mission objective isn't to beat the mainstream media, it's to be the mainstream media. Differences of view between myself and Simon, but that's hopefully what makes it interesting. Wouldn't it be dull if we just agreed? Have your say. Go to X. If you watched it live, I'll be on that in a short while. If you're rewatching it, I will keep checking your comments as well. If you like it, please retweet it or please like it. As with everybody else, we're very happy to get sponsorship, but we'll do that very clearly. If anyone gives us money, we'll tell you who it is so that you know, and you can judge if that's bias as well. Also, you can advertise on unprecedented.tv. We'll be starting adverts next week as well, but they don't influence how we report. We've got some other shows coming up as well. Tomorrow, we will be with Claire Dyer for Dire Consequences. Hopefully, Tim Scott will be rearing his wonderful head at some point with Tim Scott Uncancelled, and Basil Valentine will no doubt be making an appearance as well. Thanks very much to the team. Thanks to Simon Spanswick, who is the Chief Executive Officer of the Association for International Broadcasting. More than anything, thanks to you for trusting me with some of your time. I'm Lembetopic. This is Unprecedented.tv.
This is all wrong. I shouldn't be up here. I should be back in school on the other side of the ocean. Yet you all come to us young people for hope. How dare you?
Boring. 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 Boring.
You got it work. Don't tell us what we're going to feel. We're trying to solve a problem. Don't tell us what we're going to feel.
I'm not telling you.
Because you're in no position to dictate that.
That's exactly what you're doing.
You're in no position to dictate what we're going to feel.
I call again for an immediate ceasefire in Gaza, the return of the sausages, the hostages,